Gold Coast what it is today. He endeavored continually to bring us freedom and liberty. Ghana, Ghana is the name. Ghana, we wish to proclaim we will be jolly, merry and gay.
If you're a black person visiting Ghana, then you have no reason, no reason not to visit the Capecoast Castle. The Capecoast Castle did not begin as the massive fortress you are seeing now, because in 1653, the Swedish arrived on the coast and built a trading lodge. At the time, the focus was gold, and in fact, the entire region was known as the Gold Coast because of how much gold was traded here. But control of the Gold Coast did not stay in one hand for long. After the Swedes came the Danes, and then the Dutch, and finally in 1664, the British took over the structure. And then they expanded it into what has become one of the largest slave-holding castles in West Africa under the British control. At some point, gold was no longer the main commodity. Human beings became the trade. Now, the irony of this particular building is the atrocity that took place here. While captives were in the male dungeon, in tears, in anger, agony, the slave masters had built a church right above the male dungeon. And in this church, they worshipped God, they prayed, and in their worship, they drowned the pain that was taking place right beneath them. We are now entering the male dungeon. Now, this dungeon was severely overcrowded, holding hundreds of enslaved men in terrible, terrible conditions. These chambers were poorly ventilated. You can see the holes up there. That was all they had for ventilation, and also lacked sanitation. Like what you see, the ground you see currently is sweat, poop, urine that has stayed here over the years. If they were to eat, it was here. If they were to vomit, it was here. If it was to ease themselves, it was here. Now, it is said that initially they were fed outside, but at some point they started getting rebellious and started fighting amongst themselves for the little food that was provided. Hence, the feeding stayed in the chambers.
The tunnel is where exactly the tunnel ends. But from this very point, I'm sorry we can't go to from this point. Again, these are flowers or wreath also in here. These were brought in here by Africans, African Americans, people from the Caribbean. These are brought in here to pay homage to their ancestors, to our brothers and sisters who lost their lives in the trade.
It is said that before this structure was put up, the people of Cape Coast had a deity here they worshipped. And so when the slave trade ended, they decided to bring back the deity. And so people come here from time to time to pay homage. And the reefs you see in this room have been brought in here by our brothers and sisters from the diaspora, be it the Americas, the Caribbeans, and wherever we have them across the world. Just look at how dark these chambers are, and so you can imagine how dark they were during the slave trade era. Now we are done exploring the male dungeons, so we are moving to the female dungeons. As we go across the courtyard to the female dungeon, I would like to share with you an important part of history that has been missed by so many people. Have you heard the name Bartolome de las Casas? It is said that he argued and recommended the use of enslaved Africans to be used on these plantations instead of the Native Americans and the Caribbeans. Huge plantations like that of the tobacco, coffee, cotton, sugarcane needed laborers. And initially, they used the Native Americans, that's the Red Indians. But they were dying from tropical diseases that were brought in by the Europeans. Their bodies couldn't just stand it. And this is where Bartolome steps in. He was a Spanish lawyer and a Catholic priest. To him, the conditions were just too harsh for the natives or indigenous people, and so he recommended the use of enslaved Africans. To him, he said Africans were naturally strong and able to withstand diseases, as well as work under similar climatic conditions. Africans naturally are good at farming. So in 1512, some enslaved Africans were taken to places like Santo Domingo, which is present-day Haiti, to be tested on these plantations. And truly, they pulled their weight. And from there, the demand for Africans skyrocketed, the beginning of the pain and the agony. About 150 women occupied each chamber in these female dungeons. Now, it is said that some were even here with their kids. Now, mind you, they did everything here, from eating to easing themselves. And as women, you can imagine going through your menses. So they were locked up here for months till the ships arrived. So imagine having your menses straight for months without taking a bath. And to add to this, all forms of abuse took place in these dungeons. These women were mentally, physically, sexually abused. And for the women who rebelled and refused to sleep with the slave masters, they were brought into these chambers. They were extremely dark with no ventilation. So you can imagine the torture in here. And talking about torture, these were condemned cells for people that had rebelled. Now, it is said that these cells meant death. These chambers had no ventilation and they were deprived food and water. To them, it was a way of deterring others from doing the same. This is the door of no return, and to me, it is the most powerful part of the castle. Through this narrow exit, enslaved Africans were marched onto waiting ships bound for the Americas and the Caribbean. Once they stepped through that door, they were leaving behind their homeland forever, their family forever. Every enslaved African that went through this door never came back. This was where they said their last goodbyes to the motherland. But today, Ghana has named it the Door of Return, meaning our doors are open to our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. You are welcome back home. There is a significant room up here that you need to see and know about. It played a very important role in the slave trade. The Palaver Hall played a pivotal role in the slave trading. This was their slave market where negotiations took place. They treated this room as an auction room, and this was where the buying and selling of slaves took place. Now, mind you, the European companies were many, so they would line up in this room and have the captives also lined up. Their European doctors were made to examine the captives, and those that were deemed healthy and fit were negotiated at higher prices. And mind you, they were sold off in barter trade, where they were exchanged for cheap European commodities. Remember, I mentioned some women were condemned to some cells for refusing to sleep with the slave masters. Now, those that accepted, some did out of fear, some in hopes of getting some special or better treatment. Now, some children were born out of such relationships. These rooms were used as schools to educate those kids, that's the mixed race kids. And these children later became some of the early elites of Ghana. This room is the building history, and in here you get to learn more about the castle and the slave trade. And so as we take a tour of this place, let me share with you an interesting fact that I know a lot of people have never heard before, and I intentionally left it to talk about it in this part of the video. So those that didn't watch this far, they are going to miss this one. Did you know that 2 bodies were exhumed in honor of the Door of Return? In August every year, Ghana celebrates the Emancipation Day. And so in 1998, during this celebration, the remains of 2 distinguished members of the African diaspora, that is Madame Pa from Jamaica and Samuel C from New York, were exhumed and repatriated back to Ghana. They were laid to rest in Ghana to symbolize the return of enslaved ancestors. Their journey involved re-entry through the Capecoast Castle's Door of Return, which was formerly known as the Door of No Return. A ritual was performed to break the curse that no enslaved African who walked out from that door returned. This is to say that they have finally returned, making a shift from a history of exile to a return of descendants. After the abolition of the slave trade, the castle became the administrative headquarters of the British colonial government in the Gold Coast. And then in 1957, Ghana gained independence, and then slowly it transformed into a museum and now a national monument. When you visit the Capecoast Castle, please do well to support local craft and tourism by purchasing any of these items. As you leave the castle, you leave with a sense of respect for the resilience of the African people and a determination to ensure that the atrocities of the past are never forgotten.